Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. The reason why I asked at the beginning was because I saw a wonderful cartoon recently about Zoom conferences, and they said that it was like the modern seance, where you all gather around saying, "Someone wants to join us. Is Elizabeth there?" And so that was very funny. So now you have to check every time to make sure you have the audio and everything. I haven't prepared too much in the way of remarks because the trouble is I'm commenting on something that I think everyone here knows. So every time I do one of these things, I try to find a way to find something new to say. We are in trouble. And you're all familiar with what's been going on. From the very first day that this happened, November 4th, they started using the hashtag Tigray genocide. Even before there was a genocide, they were throwing this out. Now, I frankly think that they got this because the hashtag was Amhara genocide months before, and I've been marking the number of actual massacres that have been perpetrated against the Amhara people since last summer of 2020. I've been marking this. So I think they appropriated that for that purpose. So November 4th comes along and we have a hashtag for Tigray genocide before it's even possible. This has been a coordinated campaign, and what's incredibly infuriating is that we're getting pushback from, of all people, Antonio Guterres of the UN and others saying, all the conspiracy theorists. Well, no, it is a conspiracy when you have an organized, coordinated attack. If you have media which repeatedly uses the same experts, Tronville, Davison, Alex DeWall, Cameron Hudson, Rashid Abdi, and others, if you keep going back to the same white experts to interpret Africa, and if you folks are familiar with me at all, and if anybody who's watching this is familiar with me, I've been haranguing for ages saying, put African voices on. And of course they don't. We're in the age of Black Lives Matter, and yet somehow it's acceptable to have all these guys talk about Africa, and they're not even there, including one who's been deported from the country twice. That's not enough. What has happened as well is you have a media, Western media, which goes over and is the interpreter of Africa in terms of the news. And what they did, which was deviously clever, give the devil his due, they have fixers arranged there to greet them, to walk them around and lead them by the hand to whatever they want to do. Whatever they want to show. And these idiots will go and do it. And they think they're getting a story because part of the Western rubric of journalism is drama. It's very interesting when you watch BBC World Service and you watch Focus on Africa. Because they have to fill a half hour of African news, you see regular news, you see business news, you see innovations in terms of manufacturing, you see what's going on in terms of people's daily lives in terms of new infrastructure. And you don't get that in the big headline news that you normally get on the evening news of London on ITV or BBC. You don't get that on NBC or CBS. What you get is Africa is chaos. And that's what they look for. So you have these idiots being led around by fixers who are clear TPLF operatives. And we know this for a fact because one of my associates found one spouting TPLF rhetoric openly in the hotel lobby. And this guy was passed along from the woman who interviewed Getachew Reda and got that scoop to the National Geographic, if memory serves. So you have that. So you have a combination of that. And then you have ridiculous efforts in terms of PSYOPs, which can be effective to asinine. Just today, you have a clown called, I think his name is Anders, and he bills himself as George Anders 007, if you can believe it, mind of a 12-year-old. And this guy puts out a tweet saying, there's chaos, something to the effect of, there's chaos at the airport as people are rushing to get on flights and get out of the country. And what does he do? He shows a screenshot of the standard flights, and only 4 of the flights are international. And you can't see anything. All you're seeing is a flight schedule. But he's backing this up with just that to make give the impression that people are rushing the airport to flee the country. And it's ridiculous. You could do the same thing. You could take a flight chart of what's in Tampa and say Floridans are fleeing the state. That's what you've got. You have a professor in Mekelle who claimed, maybe you saw this, who claimed this is the artillery in Desi, and shows artillery pieces firing from some strip with lots of lights. And it only took half an hour to an hour for people to figure out, hey, this is a 2016 shot from Russia, an anniversary of some kind of military event. And it's not even on the same continent. And this gets passed around. And what is the effect? The effect is confusion. The effect is to sap the will. The effect is to spread disinformation. So there's such a muddle that you can't tell the truth anymore. We see this with Micadra. Why is the US Embassy in Eritrea putting out Facebook posts re-arguing the massacre in Micadra? I've been to Micadra. My team interviewed victims there. We have the facts. We know what went on. And yet, months later, they've decided to argue this. We know that despite the collective attempts by the mainstream media to have the definitive word on Axum, the main narrative is nonsense. How do I know this? Because ESET was kind enough to share with me the rough video of the religious celebration that took place on one of the days this was supposed to happen. It was uploaded to YouTube December 4th, long before there were any allegations of a massacre. And so you see people walking around outside the church where blood was supposed to be flowing, and they're perfectly calm. They're talking about how attendance is down, and nobody has an answer for that. I raise it all the time, and we don't get a response because you can't respond. There is no counter to that. Here's the evidence. Here's the video. It's uploaded December 4th. Try again. Yet it doesn't make an impact because part of the strategy is to ignore anybody who raises a hand and says, excuse me, this is nonsense. And as I'm sure all of you are aware, my digital recorder was stolen at the airport. My sources were outed. And they made allegations against the UN officials and how they were colluding with the TPLF. And what's interesting is how the media handled that. No one called me, even though I'm the person who conducted the interview. No one bothered to confirm any of the facts with me. All they did was go out of their way to smear the two sources and run with that. And what's interesting is the reaction of regular Ethiopian people in the diaspora, because they said, basically their response was, this confirms exactly what we thought, and they were right. In other words, a TPLF gambit of disinformation blew up in their faces. It was a major misstep. And then sources have since provided me with an internal email from the UN, which pretty much confirms that the TPLF are using forced recruitment. Moreover, a source has told me how the TPLF will beat up and detain even UN staff, and the UN will cover it up. This should be headline news in the West. This has ramifications around the world. Why is this not being reported? Because they simply don't want it to. They want to push this narrative. And so I cannot be seen to exist. And other people like me cannot be seen to exist. Jamal Countess works for Getty Images, which is about as legit a media operation as you can ask for. Only three media operations have taken advantage of his photos of my Micadra. And he's taken wonderful photos. He's got the backstories of the victims. Three. Three operations that have taken advantage of that. Two of them in Germany. Why? Because there's clearly a concerted effort. Now, the thing is, I've said some of this stuff before, so I want to wrap it up by saying what we can do. Because if you're preparing this joint letter that is going to different authorities, may I urge you that the thing is, there has to be reform, broad-based international reform across the continent in terms of how journalism is done. And I was going to make some of these claims in a speech in a couple of weeks or so, but I'll give you some tidbits now. Quite frankly, as some authorities on here know, it is very difficult for Africans to migrate, even to go attend conferences to the West. The EU and North America treat them as criminals even before they show up and make it very difficult, let alone immigrating to other countries. To my mind, quite frankly, if Western media outfits want to send somebody to cover Botswana or cover Ethiopia or cover Ghana, then you should have international arrangement that they have to take one of yours. A Botswana correspondent should be entitled to go cover the United States. A reporter from Ghana should be let in to cover France. Have some quid pro quo. You should have reform over this system of fixers. We have Turkey, I think, is a good example, and I believe this is the arrangement, where you have to go through a course just to be a tourist guide there. There is no good damn reason why there shouldn't be accreditation for fixers so that they have to go through courses on the history of the country, the current affairs, so you have to be an accredited licensed fixer to work for international correspondence. And yes, there are some criticisms of that, which would be immediate in terms of, say, governments trying to twist these people to their ends. That can be an international body that regulates. There should be that. There should be other reforms in terms of journalism so that when Western correspondents come into a country, they have to abide by certain rules, which is a fundamental requirement on their visa. You are a guest in the country. You cannot go around lying about it, as we've seen in some of the copy by Robbie Corey-Boulet, as we've seen by Declan Walsh. You can't come in and glorify child soldiers. You cannot come into an African country and violate the safety of a safe house for sexual assault victims and splash them all over your evening broadcast. No, that's got to stop. So there has to be fundamental reform in terms of journalism in developing countries. The days where you have white people who come along to interpret the country and they're supposed to be the end all and be all say in terms of how even current events are happening has to be over. And of course, some idiot out there will say, well, you're white. Yeah, the only reason why I have a voice at all in this is because we have an entire infrastructure of media and the outside world who won't listen to Africans. The very reason why I went over to Ethiopia in August was because the two diaspora groups that funded me said, they won't listen to us. You've got to go. That's why I went. I wanted to go, but the thing is, they said they won't listen to us. So it is a cruel irony that I'm busy pushing for this stuff, when in actual fact, it should be that somebody should be listening to qualified African experts, African voices to do it. And I can go back to writing books, which is what I normally do. I'm not an activist. But the thing is, I have to be an activist because I'm also a human being. And we can't let this system perpetuate where you treat an entire continent like a gulag, don't let people out, send Western reporters in and say, oh my gosh, Africa's in chaos. Oh, these people, oh, their ethnic rivalries. Oh, they're killing each other. Here's some footage of it. Wow. It amounts to conflict porn. We have to have a reform system that kicks out operations like Sahan Research, Crisis Group, the others, who are just vampires on these countries. And if I had my way, I'd be kicking out Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International as well, because they are new colonialist operations, which are only there so they can bleed donations out of people on the other side of the world and out of the World Bank and out of other operations. While the main funders of, I believe it's Crisis Group, is George Soros, who's funding one of those. What kind of, and these people are not accountable to you. They get to come in, make their spurious claims about how your politics are, how your people get along, and they don't answer to you. That has to change. It has to change urgently. So my contribution to this joint letter to authorities would be, please put in something about these things. And just in closing, the fact of the matter is I'll say this every venue I can get. Ethiopia is bleeding. You have a terrorist organization, oligarchy, practically a cult, which are trying to exterminate the country. Fight like you've never fought before. If you are watching this from within Ethiopia, fight like you've never had before, because they will kill you. That is the agenda. The agenda is slaughter. And I'm sorry, but nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to join in the struggle and defend yourself and defend your family and fight for your country. And I want to get back there as soon as possible, because I would be very glad and proud to be there to help. Thank you very much for the time.